Today to come and talk to you a little bit about the main effort that we are focusing on in the Southern Plains, and that's the issue of soil health. You can see the title of my talk. If you want to fight climate change, if you want to clean the water, if you want to feed the world, the secret's in the soil. And I think that's one of the things, so much of the time when we talk about natural resource issues, we've got a lot of challenges in front of us. Whether you're talking about challenges with non-point source pollution, talking about erosion, talking about climate change, many issues that are out in front of us, a lot of times the answer to those questions to solve those problems is actually right underneath our feet. And it goes back to what we've all been trying to do in the work of soil health. And a lot of times that's what people, when I talk to them, and I say that I work for the Climate Hub, when I'm here to talk about soil health, they say, why do you want to talk about dirt? What's the issue with dirt? You know, why is it such a big issue, and why is the Climate Hub and why is USDA focusing so much on this issue of soil health and trying to address issues like soil erosion? So I always like to do visual aids. And first I have to ask you, have you ever seen the demonstration of the earth as an apple? Have you? If you have, too bad, you're going to get to see it again, because that's what we're getting ready to do. But when folks talk about the importance of soil and the importance of soil health, and why it is important and why it's such a big issue for USDA, you know, I like to bring up the earth as an apple, because you think about it, the apple, round like planet Earth, and who can tell me what the majority of the surface of the earth is covered with? Water. Absolutely right. In fact, if you stop and think about it, roughly 3/4 of the surface of the world is covered with water. And so I throw my apple on the ground there, and if you stop and think about that and what we have as far as planet Earth, 3/4 of it you can't grow food on because it is covered by water. Now, this is what's left as far as the dry surface of the earth. Now, a lot of this also is areas that you can't grow food on because you've got the polar ice caps. You've got places that are too dry, or that are too wet, that you can't produce food and fiber on. So roughly half of that fourth is all we can produce, that we have any chance at all as far as producing food and fiber. Now, who can tell me where the best farm ground in the world is right now? Where is the best farm ground on planet Earth? Anybody know?
Under our cities?
It's actually under concrete. Because if you stop and think about it, where did the cities grow up? Places like London, Paris, Berlin, Kansas City, Oklahoma City. They grew up where the best farm ground was, where people could feed themselves. That's where the population center started. So if you think about that and think about the areas that again are too rocky, that either have houses or have highways or have subdivisions, have something on top of them, or it's too rocky or it's too wet, take away all of that land, and basically what you have left is this. And really, if you want to know the truth of the matter, that's what you have. All of the food and fiber that we depend on, that civilization depends on, everything that provides life and support the human species rests on an inch of topsoil. But that's big when you think about how we cut out the planet Earth. When you stop and think about that, it takes 500 years on average to produce an inch of topsoil. When it's gone, it's gone. We got 9 billion people that we're going to have to feed by mid-century. We're doing it on a declining resource base. We have to maintain the resources that we have, and we have to make sure that we've got the ability to produce food and fiber, and it starts with protecting that small amount of planet Earth. That's why it's important. And when I mention soil, we are losing soil at an alarming rate. You know, and that's what, I love these two pictures. That's actually from western Oklahoma this last spring. We see the water erosion. We're all familiar with sites like that where we have a heavy rainstorm and we've seen the loss of topsoil due to sheet, rill, and gully erosion. And then over there, that's actually during the drought of from 2011 to 2015 at Lubbock, Texas. And I love that picture. As I mentioned, I worked with the folks who did the Dust Bowl film a couple years ago. And you can take that picture, take out the houses and the cars, and just superimpose stuff from the 1930s. That's basically what we were seeing again. We're losing soil. We are losing our soil at an alarming rate. And when you look at our part of the world, let me ask you, how much topsoil do you think we lose on it? Or let me ask you your operations. For you farm and ranch in this room, how much topsoil do you think you lose a year? Any guesses? Anybody want to take a stab? There was actually a survey done of agriculture producers not too long ago that was done by Successful Farmer magazine, and they asked them, how much topsoil do you think you're losing? Well, a lot of guys said, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 1/4 ton maybe of soil per acre per year. In truthfulness, on average, we lose 5.8 tons of soil per acre per year in production agriculture. Now in Oklahoma and Kansas, we do a little bit better job, but we lose 2.5 tons of soil per acre per year. Now the Southern Plains region that I work for with Climate Hub covers Oklahoma, Texas, and Kansas. And I was like, I'm from Oklahoma, we have a natural rivalry with our friends south of the Red River, and I always like to point out to them that they lose 8 tons of soil per acre per year. And you want to do the math on that, and I did this this last week because I've done it for Oklahoma. For every pound of wheat that's produced in the state of Kansas, we lose 2 pounds of soil. Now don't feel bad about that. In Oklahoma, for every pound of wheat we produce, we lose over 3 pounds of soil. But the bottom line is, if we're going to feed the world, this isn't sustainable. Because like I said, when that topsoil is gone. It's not coming back. We have to protect that resource. And as an agriculture producer, we ought to be interested in it anyway, because that's the basis of all our wealth. You know, you go get a loan at the bank, get an operating loan, most of the time, what's your collateral? It's your farm ground. You know, if we're not going to do things to deal with soil erosion, let's do ourselves a favor. Let's not run cattle. Let's not farm crops anymore. Let's just go to the bank, take out our money, go down to the creek and start throwing dollar bills into the water. Because that's basically what we're doing. We've got to do a better job of protecting the soil. And the soil is alive. And we've heard, anybody who's heard the soil health talks from NRCS has heard the talk about how there's more life in a teaspoon of soil than there are people walking on the face of the globe. And it's those bugs, bacteria, and fungi that have a symbiotic relationship with the plants on top of the surface of the ground that helps as far as with nutrient efficiency, that helps with water uptake, and also it helps keep our cycles in balance. And that gets us to some of the environmental issues. But our soil is starving, naked, and has a fever. This also isn't sustainable. And if you really stop and think about it, restoring the health of the soil can play a key role in addressing many environmental problems while also helping our bottom lines. And that's one of the things that we're really pushing at the Climate Hub, is trying to show these ways how soil health practices, how land treatment practices, how good conservation on the ground not only helps us as far as controlling erosion, not only helps us protect our source of the resource that we've got to have to produce food and fiber, but also helps keep our water clean, address issues like climate change, and also helps the bottom line of agriculture producers. But you know, you think about water quality and quantity, and that's clearly an issue that we all have to deal with. You know, you think, gosh, I was just reading the other day, one of the things being debated in Congress right now is the amount of money that's going to go into research for algae blooms across the country. We've all heard the stories of what's happened in the upper Midwest. Again, I'm from Oklahoma. Y'all are probably familiar with some of the lawsuits that happen around Tulsa because of the situation with the poultry industry. Clearly, we've got challenges that we need to address with water quality and quantity. Because if you stop and think about it, when that water hits our ground, we want to hold on to every drop we possibly can. I've got family that lives in Oklahoma City. My wife's from Oklahoma City. I love my in-laws, really do, love her cousins, but I'm a greedy bastard. When that water hits my place, I want it to stay on my land. I farm in the North Canadian River watershed and the Cimarron River watershed. I want to use that water before they ever get a chance to have it. And I think that's key when you're talking about droughts and floods, especially droughts. I'm from western Oklahoma again. More people left my country that it was because it was too dry than too wet. We need to hang on to every drop we possibly can. And climate change too. And I put these pictures up here because talking to the Climate Hub, you know, depending on who you talk to, a lot of folks say that it's, I always like going back to it, that, you know, they hear a lot of people talk about climate change. There's pictures of graphs saying what's going on. It's kind of like Bigfoot. You know, yeah, there's some pictures. We don't really know if they exist or not. Some folks think it's a clowny plot. Or I put this on there. I've got 4 kids. And they're all Harry Potter fanatics. If you don't know who that is, that's Lord Voldemort. And if you've ever heard, if you ever read or seen the Harry Potter movies, they always say he who should not be named. You're never supposed to mention Voldemort's name. Well, a lot of folks know something's happening out on the land, but they don't want to talk about climate change. Well, at the end of the day, something is going on, and we've got to be prepared for the extreme weather that is being exacerbated by our changing climate. And while you may not believe in climate change, I guarantee you everybody in this room believes in droughts. We know that droughts are a reality in the southern plains of the United States. And we believe in floods. And when you talk about climate change, in all honesty, all we're talking about is the extreme weather that we've always seen in this part of the country getting a little crazier. What we've always thought of as the 100-year flood becomes the 50-year flood. The 50-year flood becomes bad spring rains. You know, we've seen what's happened with extreme. We've always had fire. Perfect example. We've always had wildfire in this part of the world. 2 years in a row, we've seen what happened as far as wildfire is concerned. We've always had late season freezes. But when you start to think about how in the last decade, you know, we've seen almost 50%, at least in Oklahoma and Texas, we've seen half of the year the wheat crop be drastically affected by late season freezes, something's going on. And it kind of plays to that idea that the crazy weather we've always had being a little bit crazier. But even if you don't believe that, we all know that we're going to have droughts and floods. We're going to have these issues. We've got to be ready to deal with them. And even if you don't want to concern about the weather, we all want to save money. And if we can do things that help our bottom line, then and also are things that help protect the environment and help harden our system to extreme weather events, I think it's something that we need to look at. Because when you think about why do we need to improve the health of the soil, as I said, it is the best way to harden our agriculture system to extreme weather. Now, I am not a meteorologist. I'm not a climatologist. But the guys who do have the crystal balls, like I said, will tell you we are seeing trends with changes in our weather. Something is going on. Now, I'm not here to say who shot John. I'm not going to say what the cause of it is. But I am going to tell you we got a dead body in the middle of the room and we got to do something about it. Something is happening. We need to be ready for the extreme weather that's on the future's horizon. We got to use what tools we have to help agriculture address environmental concerns voluntarily. Now, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer, but I can count. And there's a whole lot more people live in Oklahoma City than live in rural Oklahoma. There gets to be challenges on water quality. Gets to be a fight. Who's going to win that? We've got to do what we can do. Voluntary programs, not forcing anybody to do anything they don't want to do, but using the tools that we have in the USDA toolbook to help address some of these issues, and we can do it. You know, I showed that picture from Lubbock with the dust storms in 2011. The only reason why we talk about that is because it's unusual. You know, we had in 2011, we had a drought worse than the drought that we had in the 1930s. And you stop and think about it, the drought in the 1950s was worse than the 1930s. Did you hear anything about the Dust Bowl in the 1950s? No. Why? Because the work you've done. The work the farmers and ranchers in this part of the world, in partnership with local conservation districts, in partnership with USDA, partnership with the state conservation agencies, not through iron-fisted regulation, but through the open hand of friendship, through technical assistance, through financial assistance, working together cooperatively, we addressed the challenges that we saw in the 1930s. Do we have some dust blown in the 50s? Sure. Do we still have problems with erosion today? Absolutely. But we've come a long way. We can do the same thing with these other issues. We have to protect both. We have to protect our water, both quality and quantity, because we understand how important water is. We got to control soil erosion. Like I said, we got 9 billion people to feed by mid-century, and we're still losing, even with the outstanding work we've done on soil erosion. We got a long way to go. And we need to help everybody's bottom lines, because at the end of the day, as an agriculture producer, I've been talking about how we got to deal with the environment. This ain't a charity operation when you're farming. You got to make a profit, and it's got to make economic sense for the agriculture producer. So, what do we need to do? We need to increase our organic matter in our soil. Now, why? Organic matter helps hold moisture, helps reduce erosion, and provides the food and housing for that subsoil microbial community that I talked about earlier. And if you look at research from Kansas State University, if you can get a 1% increase in your organic matter, you can triple the soil's water holding capacity. That's over 25,000 gallons of water available for growing crops and forage on average. Like I said, a lot of people left this area because it was too dry instead of too wet. When that rain hits, we need to hold on to every drop that we possibly can, and we need to get our water cycle back into balance. If you can hold more moisture in that subsoil, one of the things about drought, when you think about the drought of 2011, I'm good friends with the climatologist, the state climatologist in Oklahoma. He's from Beaver. He's a farm boy from Panhandle. And he always liked to talk about how droughts feed on themselves. And we don't think about that, about how the moisture in the soil interacts with the moisture in the atmosphere. And if you don't have subsoil moisture, a drought will start to feed on itself and become worse than it should be. You can get your water cycle back into balance. Not only can you help alleviate or help lessen the intensity of some of these droughts, but you also help with things like intermittent stream flow, which help folks downstream. 1% increase in organic matter has been able to show up to $700 worth of additional nutrients available per acre for growing crops in Ohio. Now that's from Ohio State. I can't tell you that you're going to see the same thing in Kansas, the same thing in Oklahoma, the same thing in Texas. But let's say it's $10 worth of additional nutrients per acre for growing crops. 15. If you don't want it, I'll take it. You know, and that's one of the things that really has struck me when we've looked at soil health. I grew up on a dairy farm. We milked cows when I was a kid. Gave a lot of 4-H and FFA dairy talks. And if you've ever heard a kid give a dairy talk in 4-H and FFA, there's always that obligatory line where they talk about calcium. And you say, you know, if you want calcium in our agriculture system to extreme weather events, and going back, I said it helps control erosion. These same practices that increase organic matter also help reduce erosion. And like I said, it takes roughly 500 years to create new topsoil. When the topsoil in this part of the world started to form, Christopher Columbus was in diapers. You stop and think about that. When the topsoil started to form, Christopher Columbus was in diapers. When it's gone, it's gone. We've got to protect what we have. Reducing erosion also helps reduce non-point source pollution. We're helping ourselves when we do reduce soil erosion, but I've mentioned water quality concerns. We can control erosion. We can also help get a crack at controlling non-point source pollution. And studies in Missouri and Iowa have shown as much as a 15 bushel an acre increase due if you can control erosion. Because of erosion, they're losing as much as 15 bushels per acre on corn and soybean ground in Iowa and Missouri. Now again, can I tell you that's going to transfer to Kansas? No. Well, let's say it's 5 bushels an acre, 10 bushels an acre. It's an improvement and it helps our bottom lines. And when you take that a little step further, the National Association of Conservation Districts just completed a 3-year study on 4 farms in the upper Mississippi River Basin, Missouri, in the states of Missouri, Illinois, and Iowa. They showed that the average planting cost went up when people switched to no-till and did cover crops. That went up by $38 an acre, but fertilizer costs went down by $50 an acre. Again, improving the health of that subsoil microbial community helped more with fertilizer efficiency and reduce the cost that they had to pay out of pocket. Erosion repair costs went down $16 an acre, and yield values increased by an average of $76 an acre. By doing soil health practices, the net income for those producers went up between $83 and $110 per acre. Now that's a study that's just been released by the National Association of Conservation Districts. Can I tell you that you're going to see those same numbers in this part of the world? No. But I think there's been enough producers through anecdotal evidence that will tell you that you will see good numbers, that we will see improvement, and it will help our bottom line. One of the things that we are trying to do at the Hub is to duplicate some of these numbers in this part of the world. We're going to be looking at economic numbers over the next couple of years on soil health practices and targeted watersheds to see if we can duplicate these findings in this part of the world. But I think from what we've seen so far, it's very encouraging that if we'll do these things, it will help our bottom line. Now, I mentioned climate change. It's important from a climate change standpoint that we deal with organic matter. Because roughly 50 to 60% of organic matter is nothing but carbon. If you go back to high school and junior high biology, we all learned that plants breathe in carbon dioxide and breathe out oxygen through photosynthesis. If you don't disturb the soil, that carbon dioxide is sequestered in the soil in the form of organic matter. Because really that's all we're talking about, is trying to get the carbon cycle back into balance. Whether you're talking about water, you're talking about nutrients, you're talking about carbon, it's all about trying to get some of these cycles that we've knocked out of whack back in line. Nobody did it on purpose. Nobody's bad. Nobody did anything evil. It's just that we've learned that there are certain things we could do a little bit better. And if we can do things to help sequester carbon, we can start getting a handle on carbon dioxide. Mentioned carbon dioxide is sucked out of the air through photosynthesis. In Oklahoma, there's been studies that have shown that no-till alone can sequester around 0.5 metric ton of carbon dioxide per acre per year. Plus, those same studies showed that no-till, and this is winter wheat production in Oklahoma, no-till uses around 3 gallons of diesel less per acre. So not only are you sequestering carbon dioxide, you're not putting as many emissions in the atmosphere to begin with because you're using less diesel. And that's money that you don't have to spend out of pocket because you're not burning as much diesel to begin with. So again, it's a win-win. There also was a study by the National Academy of Sciences that said if Great Plains agriculture, if just half of Great Plains agriculture started doing soil health practices, agriculture in the region would be a net zero on greenhouse gas emissions. And actually that's a conservative number. Some folks it would be a sink. And that actually we would be taking more out of the atmosphere than we were putting in. But for sure, if you could get 50 to 60% of agriculture producers in the Great Plains region to do soil health practices, it would be a net zero on greenhouse gas emissions. And all this goes hand in hand. Because I'm going to use some examples real quick. We actually did some studies on some stream segments in Oklahoma and Kansas. I'll start with Oklahoma because I'll brag on my home state a little bit. We've taken more than 50 streams off the 303D list, the EPA's impaired streams list. And we did that not through regulations, not through lawsuits, but through voluntary conservation practices, working with guys through financial assistance to get them to convert to no-till, incorporate cover crops, do grass planting on highly erodible land, and do better pasture management and riparian restoration. Now we looked at some of these streams. In fact, in 2015, there were 3 watersheds in Oklahoma that were taken off the 303D list, taken off the EPA's impaired list, again, through voluntary practices. And one thing I need to point out about those were not practices targeted toward water quality. The state of Oklahoma actually sat down, NRCS and our state conservation agency sat down and said, where have we seen a lot of producers sign up for CSP? Where's there been a lot of interest in conversion to no-till and cover crops through EQIP? And they identified 3 watersheds, and all we did through 319 funding was go out really and monitor what the results were. Again, these were guys through farm bill practices converting to no-till or doing better pasture management or whatever, not because they were targeted for water quality, but because they saw the benefits to their operation, or they wanted to make changes in their operation for time reasons or financial reasons, whatever it would be. By doing that, we saw that those streams were taken off the 303D list, and we ran the numbers using NRCS's Comet Planner tool, and we showed that every year those practices are taking over 35,000 tons of CO2 out of the atmosphere. That's over 7,000 cars, the equivalent of taking over 7,000 cars off the road. And again, that wasn't through some big program that was designed toward climate change. That wasn't through some big regulation that was forcing somebody to do something they didn't want to do. That was through guys through EQIP and CSP, converting to no-till, doing cover crops, taking highly erodible land out of crop production and putting it back to grass and running cattle on it. Guys doing better pasture management. We saw that it's cleaned up stream segments and it helped fight climate change, and it was done through purely voluntary programs. And in Kansas, we did the same thing on one of the RAPS programs up here. The Cottonwood River and Delaware River watersheds under RAPS, they're achieving the water quality goals. They haven't gone off the 303D list yet, but they are on target to meet that goal. And they're taking the equivalent of over 17,000 tons, nearly 4,000 cars off the road. And that's, again, all through voluntary programs. Now you say it's got to be some convoluted way that you do it. Well, how do you want agriculture producers to improve the health of the soil? Convert to no-till, or at least reduce tillage. Plant cover crops. Do better pasture management. Plant grass on highly erodible land. Those are what we want to do primarily for folks to undertake soil health practices. So, how can farmers and ranchers reduce erosion? Well, go no-till, or at least reduce tillage. Plant cover crops, do better pasture management, plant grass on highly erodible land. Now, what we want folks to do to harden themselves to extreme weather events. You start to see a trend there? What do we want to do to address non-point source pollution? Same thing. Bottom line is, if we want to deal with these natural resource problems, we're not going to solve every problem through better conservation. But I guarantee you we're going to get a crack at a lot of them, and we're going to make some serious headway. Again, not through regulations, not through that iron fist of government coming out and saying, you will do this, but through that open hand of friendship, what we've done since the days of the Dust Bowl. And you know, I talked a little bit about the cycles being out of balance. Everybody's, some people get offended when you say something like that, but stop and think about the Dust Bowl for a second. What was the Dust Bowl? Erosion is a natural process. It's always happened. Heck, Grand Canyon ain't nothing but erosion that the Colorado River's done over eons. We know erosion just happens. What happened in the 1930s? We took a natural process, and through our activity, we sped it up. Didn't mean to. Nobody meant to do that. Things just worked out that way, but we learned. We learned we'd do things better. We did them, and we accomplished our goal. We turned back the tide of dust. Issues like water quality, issues like water quantity, issues like climate change, same thing. It's just the idea of learning what we've done in the past and taking that same approach to help folks deal with problems, not through regulations, but through farm bill programs. We can get a long way down the road. And we need to do it, because when our resources are gone, they're gone. You know, I mentioned that Columbus was in Diapers when the topsoil started to form. One of the other things that we forget, if you had a cup of coffee this morning or you got a glass of water now, Cleopatra may very well have bathed in the water that you've got. Because all the water that's ever been, or ever will be, is already here. They ain't making any more of it. We got to take care of it. It's a scarce resource, and we've got to make sure that we're doing everything we can to maintain the quality of that water and the availability of that water for the future. And again, we got 9 billion people to feed. I mean, by mid-century, we're going to have to produce more food and fiber than we ever had before. And I showed you the apple a little bit ago, and that little bitty piece just keeps shrinking because the population continues to grow, and more concrete keeps covering our best farmland. We've got to make sure that we take care of those resources so we can meet that challenge. And like I said, even if you don't believe in climate change, we all believe in droughts and floods. And that's one of the things that really excites me about what we're doing at USDA right now. I do have friends that work at EPA. They wear a black hat a lot of the time. The good thing for us is what we're talking about, whether you're concerned about the environment or not, these are things that can help our bottom line. These are things that can help our financial situation and can help us maintain those resources so we can keep growing food and fiber on that land for future generations. The environment and agriculture, so much of the time, are put up as being at loggerheads. This is one area where I think we all, at least for a little while, can sit around the fire and sing Kumbaya, because there is something in it for everybody. And that's what I'm excited about, some of these ideas to try to use soil health as a tool, not only help us economically, but also help deal with the environment. And you know, if you don't take anything else away from this talk that I said, these are the points that I'd like to bring up. The same practices we use to improve the health of the soil are the same practices that help address non-point source pollution. They're the same practices that can help stream flow. I mentioned trying to get the water cycle back in balance. They're the same practices that help soil erosion, help control soil erosion. They're the same practices that help agriculture to adapt to extreme weather while reducing CO2 levels in the atmosphere. And they're the same practices that help agriculture deal with environmental problems. They're also the same ones that can help producers' bottom line. It's all tied together. And you know, I'm something of a history buff. I love the artwork, you know, from the 1930s and during World War II. How many of y'all ever seen this poster? There's a poster that was put out during the war effort during World War II. You can't read it. It says, "Get your farm in the fight. Use conservation methods for better yields now." Because we were the breadbasket of the world. We always talk about being the arsenal of democracy in the 1940s. We also fed the Allies. And we knew then that we needed to do things to maintain a productive base for food and fiber. Well, switching it around right now, help your farm feed the world. Instead of seeing the planes and the tanks and the boats in the background, look at all those faces. Because we got 9 billion mouths to feed by mid-century. Those same conservation methods can help us make sure that we can meet that challenge moving into the future and do it in a way that maintains the natural resource base for future generations. With that, that's just references for all the things I threw out there. If you want to know where I came up with all the things that were up there, that you know I just wasn't pulling it out of the air. And with that, that's all I've really got. That's my talk for today, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
If you're no-tilling for a long time and you do work the ground a couple times, how much damage is that doing?
If you work it a couple times, I'm not going to tell you that you can't work the ground, but I will say this. I think the less disturbance you can do to the soil, the better off you're going to be. All I can do is talk from my own personal experience. We've been no-tilling for 14 years. We have got a 12-foot offset disc left because we planted some wildlife plots under CSP, and I've got a 4-bottom plow with the terrace builders on the side of it, and we've been debating to get rid of that. And other than that, we sold every other piece of iron we had. We farm a little over 4,000 acres too. If you want to know how much equipment we did have that we got rid of. That's me and my brother and my nephew. My dad passed away 2 years ago. Bottom line is, I think the more you can avoid disturbing the soil, the better off you're going to be. Now, I'm not going to tell you that you can't ever till the soil. You know, I think herbicide-resistant weeds are a challenge, and one that I think we need to be looking more and more at as far as using cover crops and rotation and livestock to get them under control. But everybody's got to make a decision for their own operation. But I do think when you work up that ground, you start going backwards in a hurry. That's what I think. Yeah.
I've been in no-till for quite a number of years. One of the things I've noticed is after we get a good rain and we get a little puddle up on some of the ground, and then it dries off, and then I'm out there looking around. At first didn't realize what I was looking at, but I see all these lines drawn on the top of the soil. Hell, then it finally dawned on me that had to be earthworms up there because they were flooded out and had to come up to the surface for air. And I noticed it improved soil quality, although the herbicide-resistant weeds are starting to be a problem. And I farm north of Dodge.